right, welcome my good friend Joseph Darlington. You know him, you love him. The face and the voice both made for radio. I love you though, buddy, but you're one of my favorites. You were the reason I got into doing this podcast thing. And my career, my whole goal when I started James Bond, this whole quantum of history, was to one day be on one of your guests on being James Bond. I got to do that. So, and we've become friends,
Sweet.
and it's always fun to throw some back with you. So I'm very happy to have you on here. Such a treat.
Awesome.
I can't believe this is for the first time. Joseph Darlington on Quantum of History, Fleming versus Film. Welcome in.
Cool. Thanks, Donnie, brother. And the feelings mutual, man. Love hanging out, and it's been great tonight, and I always have a good time every time we're hanging out. So
And
looking forward to this.
inevitably, every time we hang out, at one point during the night, this movie ends up coming on our radar, and we have to have our banter back and forth. So I can't think of
Uh-huh.
anybody more I wanted to do this with. Fleming versus Film on Her Majesty's Secret Service. Well, let's just start saying, what both the film and the novel mean to you.
I would say a tremendous amount. I would say that I can honestly say that I, this is like I wouldn't call this one of my favorite James Bond films or James Bond books. I would simply say this is easily one of my favorite novels and one of my favorite films, just in general, because I think it really does sort of hit all of the marks. It's definitely Fleming's high mark for sure. I would call this the novel is Fleming's opus, I think. I mean, I definitely think that this is sort of the book where he just hits everything right, and I think it's probably pretty easily his best one. Um, and as far as I think the film, because it lifts just sort of straight from the novel, it's basically a telling of the book. A lot of the Bond films are they're connected to the book in name only, and maybe just a few character names, etc. But this one is just a telling of the novel. So I love it, and the fact that Lazenby is the Bond. Honestly, I kind of feel like that's sort of like a blessing in disguise. Like there's always talk, and not to skip ahead, but I mean, there's always talk about Lazenby, whether or not he should have been the guy here. I feel like because it was a fresh James Bond, a brand new guy without any baggage, and I'm not thinking in terms of like, is this true to his character? Because to me, it's just a different James Bond. So it's much easier to just get into the story, and Bond himself is more of a blank slate, sort of. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I really do think this one is just pretty much aces.
I can't wait to go through all the reasons everything you said is wrong. I mean, that was a long thing, and I'm thinking in my head, wow, he's so off base on all of this. No, I will say, you know, going through, I've been harsh on it just because I've been harsh on the film because I think that it was a little overrated because I think it became very trendy to think on Her Majesty's. I know you were the OG. I know you were liking it before it was cool. But I just think that so many people rank it high, and for me personally, it doesn't hit those marks. But before we get into the finalness, I guess we'll get breakthrough each time. So we're gonna go through 10 rounds, and again, I'm gonna go piece by piece, explaining to you all the reasons why you're wrong. No, but it really is. It's Fleming versus Film. I think they are both great works for what they are. But we're gonna start round one, the intro. Now, start with Fleming. Fleming starts with the memory at the beach. There's a great quote in there that says, "Worry is dividend paid to disaster before it's due." I mean, that is just so good, Fleming. Another
Yeah.
one, romantic quixotry and sheer folly. Just like word magic, the way he does this. But
Yeah.
the Fleming starts off with he passes him, wants to do more, and he's really descriptive about the car, Tracy. He goes back on all these things. What did you think about the difference, or how did you like how Fleming approached the intro?
I like it a lot, and I kind of feel like it's funny. You're kind of reminding me. I think the way he writes is sort of a good reason why I've always thought that the Bond books make a great summer read. You
Mhm.
know, like usually, you know, maybe not so much lately, but I remember like, you know, summers, like you knew you were going to go down to the beach, like at least, you know, like if not the whole weekend, at least once. And you had a book for the summer. You know, you
Yeah.
had a book that you were going to just, you know, when you're on the beach, you'll hit a couple chapters or whatever. And I kind of feel like this is a great one for that because he just kind of has that melancholy sort of flavor when you read it. You know, where again he's kind of reminiscing about things and he's describing it as if he's sort of going back in time. And it is really interesting when you read the novel and you realize that the book is being told again out of sync, like he is flashing back and he's putting puzzle pieces sort of together. So yeah, the intro is kind of a flashback, whereas in the film they just played it straight, but they didn't rearrange anything, so they just sort of played it through in the same timeline even though it jumps around in the novel. So yeah, pretty wild stuff. So um so if I'm kind of voting on which one I like better, I guess I'll say Fleming. Just because again, I feel like that's a good example of where just books in general can accomplish more than a film can in
Yeah.
terms of just letting your imagination kind of run wild.
Yeah, and I think that I like the internal dialogue that you get to hear with
Mm,
the Bond and how he's very reflexive, and a lot of the novels start with him looking back on past marriages or just kind of getting back, and he's settling in from just having gone through a difficult mission. He's always kind of dealing with a lot of emotions. Whereas the film, the setup, the intro, for me, the film, I like the intro with the way it's shot with the not being able to see his face, kind of a
yeah,
little bit of mystery coming in, but then it goes bang, 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 bang. Bond, James Bond, there's a fight. It's for me, it's very clunky in the beginning.
yeah.
Um, I mean, defend the film in that regard. Can you, I know you already gave it to the to Fleming, but what about the
Mm.
film itself? I mean, for me, it's one of the weakest parts.
I definitely wouldn't call it a weak part by any stretch. I mean, I think it's a great. I mean, it is funny when you in the film. It is again, it's sort of falling into the Hollywood trap. You know, we're introducing our movie star, so we have to, you know, come out swinging, pun semi-intended, and you know, come out with an action scene, make him seem really cool. You know, he's in his tux. Uh, you know, we're trying to really hit it home. This is James Bond, even though he looks different than we're used to. Um, but I think as a whole, I think it works pretty well. In fact, I remember having the chance to see this on the big screen at one point, like you know, one of the movie houses in like Jersey City. They were doing a retrospective, and they showed the film on the big screen. And back then, they did have like a film print. They weren't just showing a Blu-ray.
Mhm.
So, and I remember really noticing, wow, it really does make a difference on the big screen because the light hitting the water, oh, like really kind of was dazzling. Like the
Yeah.
light bouncing off the water again in real life, it would be that way. And when you saw it on the screen, it really kind of had that effect as opposed to watching it on TV.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, I've always thought that scene is a pretty great way to introduce the film. I mean, again, it is awkward because in the novel the whole point of that scene is that's the scene where they are taken away, like that's when Bond, you
Mhm.
know, is brought to see Draco. Here it is pretty not a lot of significance in the big scheme of things.
Yeah, it was
um
compared to what the novel really took that scene, and it was very cool and how it was. I think that was kind of just put together. I think the fast editing when they really made the cars look faster than they are and everything like that,
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
takes away. But I'm not going to take away, what 1960s can do with that. And
right.
the other part about the intro that I find interesting is that for as much as I'm sure people hate that line, it's become very iconic. Is that this never happened to the other fellow?
This never happened to the other fella.
I think it's
Yeah,
almost unanimous that the fourth wall breaking just feels very unlike anything else. We almost unanimously hate it, but it
yeah,
become very synonymous. And then you say, the other fellow, it's almost like this hidden. hidden words. You're like, how much do you know Bond? You're like, this never happened to the other fellow. And
Yeah.
if you can make that joke with
Right.
somebody, you know, oh, you actually know James Bond. So what do you think about that
Yeah.
last little point? And then we'll move on to the next part.
Well, it's kind of interesting because they almost got away with it scot-free, meaning like it was almost above reproach. If he simply said the line, "This never happened to the other fellow," because he holds up the shoe,
Mhm.
and the implication is that he's talking about Prince Charming and Cinderella, but then he literally does kind of look at the screen after he says it. So it's like
Yeah.
you can't, so you can't not call it a fourth wall break. You almost could have. So I guess if again, I try to put myself back into that time when James Bond was like just Looney Tunes popular. Like this was, what Star Wars was and what maybe the Marvel movies have been up until real recently, but
Yeah.
like just really kind of a phenomenon back. Yeah, exactly. I mean, they were a full blown phenomenon, and honestly, I don't think any film before that was really like that. So I sort of do sympathize with the problem. Like it's like you can't just sort of pretend that it's not a different guy.
Yeah.
Like there has to be some sort of acknowledgement. Like, yes, we get it. Just go with it, please. That it's a different guy. So, I don't know what the right. But you're right. It ages funny. Like
Yeah.
it
But
has become.
it's like it's a badge of Bondom now to just understand that
Yeah,
line and know where it comes from.
right. It takes on a life of its own, basically.
All right. So I'll do my
It
voting.
becomes something more.
I'll do my voting. I as well do Fleming for this one. Fleming versus film brought by Coke Zero. All right. Round 2.
Okay.
Tracy. Now, this was a more difficult one for me to decide on this one because the Fleming, he arrives at the hotel and Bond asks about Tracy, and he says, she's a free girl, and then they quote, "Share a smile among men," which that just kind of tells you everything you need to know. Like, oh, you know this one, right? I mean, very interesting. Just kind of imploring that she's very slutty, very promiscuous. And then the way that the Tracy scene was played out, and they replay it, and it's the white dress, pink lips, cleavage, and losing, and the scandal, and the electricity in the air that Fleming describes that scene as. You can feel like, oh my God, she doesn't have the money, and understanding she's part of this elite circle. She's
Yes.
very much that, and if she can't be allowed at any of the casinos, that's almost like losing your family. That's who you are, your friends, your circle.
Yeah.
So what did you think about how he discusses Tracy in the beginning?
Well, the scene that you're talking about, I love it, and again, that's another great example of where like a book just has so much more ability, because Fleming does go to sort of great lengths to explain like this is a big deal. Like
Yeah.
you're essentially being kicked out of polite society. Like this, yeah, right. Like you said, the circles that you would run in, like she's basically done at this point. But I do think the film does a pretty adequate job of conveying that the best they can,
Mhm.
without belaboring the point. But yeah, again, Fleming is pretty masterful at that. But if I'm gonna vote, I definitely have to just kind of give it to Diana Rigg and say I think she really does kind of. I mean,
Well,
again,
like
especially.
you know what I love
Good.
is that in addition to what Tracy was in that scene, just in addition, I just wanted to throw one more thing that we want to talk about with the Fleming is that there's a place that says, he talks about the most expensive love you'll ever have, and quote from the book, "Treat me like the lowest whore in creation."
Yeah.
Like that is Fleming, right? I mean, that is, you
Yeah.
read that. I remember the first time I read these books, and I was in my 30s when I read this, but it just hits different. Like it hits different, and you're like, I've read a lot of novels and stuff like that, but I never expected when I got into Fleming them to be so dark or to touch on these things. I kind of expected it to be kind of cookie cutter.
Yeah.
And you hear that, and you hear the line, the way they trade Tracy, it's like, wow, that is That is
Yeah.
Fleming. It felt like I was reading something revolutionary, right?
Yeah. I remember one summer in the late 90s. I think this book was like my summer read. And I remember I was sort of, there was a girl I was dating at the time. And I remember we went down to the beach for the weekend. And I remember driving back. I think she was asking about the book, and she's like, why don't we read it to kill time?" And I was like, "Okay." And she started reading it to me while I was driving, and she's reading this part, and you see her kind of go like, "Gee, what the hell are you reading here?" Like like she's like, "I was not expecting this," you know.
Right? It is.
Like she literally reads that line like treat me like the whore that I am. I was like, "Whoa." She's like,
No, right. It changes a young man the first time you hear that sentence.
right? Yeah.
Whether in book or in real life, it changes your life.
Seriously.
I will say but the film, I think they really did a good job with it as far as close as you can get for film for that time period.
Mm,
And then when Diana Rigg walks in and she bends down, and it very much they play that scene perfectly. It is all eyes on her. Um,
yes.
so just walk me through the film part of it and how good of an adaptation they could have done with that.
Yeah, I think and again kind of interesting because because they're shooting things out of order. It's not the first time you're seeing Diana Rigg, but
Mhm.
sort of, but the way they do it, it
Yeah,
kind of might as well be the first
it
time
feels it, right?
because yes, like you said, she walks in and just takes over the room. Like
Yeah.
she at that moment she's the only woman in that room. All eyes are on her. I mean, she is absolutely stunning. She walks in and she just commands the table all of a sudden, and she does lean in. She's got cleavage, and like, I mean, she's absolutely stunning.
Mhm.
um so yeah, I think she plays it perfectly. um
And I think
and
the closest they get to that, treat me like a whore is he gets in the room and there's a
mm,
quote that she says is like, "Isn't that what we're here for?" Or he says it to her, "Isn't that what we're here for? The
I'm here
violence."
for a
And
business
yeah,
transaction.
and then he slaps
Yeah.
her and all this other stuff. I can make it hurt more. I think that's what we're
Yeah.
here for. So
Hmm.
they touch upon it as think as close. They walk that line, I think, as close as they could.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what is your vote for Tracy itself? Fleming
Yeah.
or film?
I think yeah, I would have I think I have to go with the film because again I do. I mean, Fleming is he really Fleming weirdly I find can write really well for women. Like he uh like if you read the Raymond Benson novels, I always
Mhm.
find that him trying to write women's dialogue is real kind of cringe, and I don't think he does it very well, and I think Fleming does it much better. Like he
Yeah.
really is kind of gifted at that. I find
It feels
um
like to me, like as opposed is that Fleming had sexual experiences with women that really shaped him, and he's with women that were more wild, more aristocratic, more
yeah.
adventurous, almost like they gave him an awakening and an
Yeah.
insight into the more darker, more areas of women's
Mm,
sexuality, where some of the
yeah.
other writers may have not had those experiences. It just feels like
Yes.
Fleming had some times in Jamaica that he could
Yeah.
write about, and he met some women that
Oh
he could
yeah,
write
yeah.
about.
I mean, he writes layers.
Yeah.
He does, like you said. He writes dark. He writes desperation. But again, the women are kind of masking it. Like
Mhm.
like you could feel that they are just kind of dealing with it in their own way, and
Yeah.
they sort of cope and make peace with it. You know what I mean? So I mean,
Mhm.
they are a full blown fleshed out character.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're
So
going with
yeah.
film. I am 100% going to go with Fleming for all the reasons I said. The way he
Okay.
described it,
Hmm.
the way he goes, the way he writes it, the pain of the picture, the fact that I actually understand the enormity of the situation when she can't pay, whereas in the film it's more, I can't pay. Oh, I'm sorry, I
Right.
play
Right.
with you. Like it just doesn't have the gravitas that I want.
Right.
For me, hands
Yeah.
down, Fleming.
Yeah. The guy saying Dame can't pay up. It's not quite hitting the same way.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome. Well,
It's funny though because it's funny that you're like, you're gonna tell me all the reasons why I'm wrong, but I'm sort of in a weird position because I feel like there's not probably not much I'm gonna disagree with you on because I feel like again, I feel like the book is great. and the film is great. So like when you go on either side, like I I'm probably gonna be fine with either one. But
Yeah, I think if you were just being honest right now, you'd click Fleming for that one too, but your affinity for the film is clouding. But I think by the end of this, I'm going to get you. All
well,
right.
we know what it is. I think. Well, just real quick. I think that I think that the film just sort of has an advantage that it's able to add the layer of Diana Rigg, and I feel
Mhm.
like that's a part that a lot of books, like you read it and you read the character and you think to yourself, there's no way they can cast this character because like
Mhm.
no matter who they get, it's going to be kind of a disappointment because you have a vision in your mind. And I feel like Diana Rigg is one of the few cases where I think, oh no, they got it right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I'm not gonna I will say Diana Rigg for as far as the film goes, great casting. I think she plays it park. She's a magnificent actress. She's beautiful for the
mm,
part. I have no quote about it, but just the way Fleming describes it, for me, the scene, everything, hands down
yeah,
Fleming. Now
absolutely.
we move on. Round 3, Draco. So this is interesting. We talk about the way that Fleming writes, and he has this darkness, and he has this. He again, I feel like he's been around women. He's had experiences with women that I think many authors maybe can't draw from that well, right?
Mm,
And this is one of those that's very interesting. He's like, um, the knife throwing and all that, the way he gets there, and he talks about the Union course, but the way he talks about his daughter, right? What an interesting thing. She has a desire to be raped. There's a wilderness inside of her. He talks
yeah,
about how he met his mother and took her and all this other stuff. Like
mm,
very, very describing traits, wild child, scandals, an amazing life with the mother, and she had her daughter, but the daughter died, so we'll live with her. Like it's just some really
yeah,
interesting
yeah,
things. Um,
yeah.
so what do you think about the way that the Fleming describes Draco?
Yeah, I think I mean it's funny when you watch the film, like I've always said, like, you know, like, well, first off, this is a film I don't think you would ever see again. Like any of the Roger Moores, the Brosnans, the Daniel Craigs, they're always kind of writing, like, their mindset is, Bond has to save the world from a bad guy. You
Mhm.
know, Fleming is writing about this rich gangster tycoon who's trying to talk James Bond into marrying his daughter and saying
Yeah,
that she wants to be raped. I mean, like, stuff like, and I think as crazy as, again, when you watch the film and Draco is saying she needs is a man to dominate her, and
yeah,
it's like, and again, you wouldn't see that today, but the irony is that the book goes even further,
yeah.
and Fleming says some shit in the in the book
I
that you're
know,
just like,
right?
holy cow. um
Yeah, it is.
right,
It's
I mean,
jarring, but it's different, and you understand. I mean, even my experiences with some of the Eastern European dads, very much the same thing. I remember an instance when there was a Eastern European woman yelling, and he looked at the husband and said, why are you not hitting my daughter? She's out of line.
yeah,
Stuff like
yeah,
that. And that was
yes,
not long
yeah,
ago. So just
yeah,
a different culture, and it's interesting to see that that's still at play, and to hear that there. So, and for the film, I would say the film did a really good job. I think the meeting is interesting. I think
mm,
when I'm watching the film, I am interested. I think the back and forth between Lazenby and the actor is actually pretty good. I think it's probably
mm,
my favorite acting skills that George Lazenby shows is in that. But it
yeah,
is interesting that he gets $1 million back then, and he's
yeah,
still not enough.
right, right.
Imagine what that would be like today, just to marry one. He's like, I have plenty of money. It's kind of
Seriously, right?
yeah,
I
I
don't need
guess.
£1 million.
I
Must be nice.
um, but yeah, I would say both of them do very well. But let's vote right now. Joe Darlington, Fleming or film, Jocko's meeting and Draco in general.
I feel like it's kind of a cop out answer because I'm gonna sort of say the same thing I said before, is that it's the fact that it was cast as well as it was. I mean, I kind of feel like Draco's sort of the perfect quintessential uh the guy who plays him, whose name is gonna slip my mind right now. But I mean, he just nails it.
Yeah.
I kind of Gabriel Frazetta, that's his name. I mean, he just nails his character, and again, it's kind of it's a character that you start to see, like it becomes a bit of a prototype. You know, it's Bay, Draco, um, Columbo. You know,
Yeah.
again, you start to see this prototype showing up.
And
Because
even the
again,
added part
I
about
think
the bullfight, like they have the meeting in the bullfight, and
yeah,
that's not in the film or in Fleming. It adds to it. I think there is more drawn out. You kind of get the scenery, you get the span, you get the bullfighting. Um,
yeah.
I think yeah, but you know what? You're going film, and I am actually going to go film on this one too. I think that for the differences
Okay.
between the Fleming and the film, I think the film did this very, very good, and I think that adding, a little bit extra of the places, locations, locale, and Draco's cast, I think perfectly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm gonna flip the film's gonna get one for you.
All right, I love it. And you know, and it's a great point about the bullfight too, by the way, because you know, I don't like the fact that the bullfight is sort of happening, and it kind of adds to the tension of the scene. The fact that
Mhm.
there's, you know, the I mean, it's a pretty intense thing that's happening behind them, you know. So
Tell him, Papa, what he wants to know.
you know,
Or you will never see me
yeah,
again, Papa.
I tell you, it's great stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Round 4, the College of Arms. Now, I have to tell you, Fleming kills me in this one.
Mm.
I lose complete interest in this book. He drags on way too long about this. I still have it written. I have an episode written about the history of the College of Arms, and
Mm.
I was so bored myself doing the history and doing that. I scrapped the
Yeah.
episode. I'm like, if I'm this bored doing this, I'm not telling this.
Yeah.
But I actually spent a lot of time researching the College of Arms, and can tell you, it's just as
Yeah.
boring doing your own research as it is reading Fleming's research. Um, for me, this one was different as opposed to the film, which they go and they have to go find. He has a Playboy scene. He's up there with the technology. He's
Mm.
breaking into the safe. It just adds way more layer to this. Can
Yeah.
you juxtapose, or what do you think about the differences in how they treat the build up, the College of Arms? I'll put them all, lump them all in together.
Yeah. I think you make a great point. That, you know, I find that in a lot of Fleming's books, there's times when he feels very fresh and unique, and then there's other times when you feel him slipping into sort of his own formula.
Mhm.
And I think one of the things that he tends to do is, you know, if he gets a subject, like if his book is going to feature this topic, he will write about it at great length. And I kind of feel like it's almost like he's
Goldfinger did it with golf, right? I mean, I like golf,
right,
so I
like
like that. But yeah, it's very long into golf, and this was very long
yeah,
in
like
College of Arms.
he just kind of get off on a little bit of a tangent, and
Mhm.
it's almost like he's trying to find the interesting part, and it's almost like if I write long enough, it'll click.
Yeah,
But this
that's a
one, yeah,
good
you're right,
point.
it doesn't exactly. It's not exact. Yeah, I don't need pages and pages and pages on this. So I think the film does it just fine, and I think that Bond kind of you see Bond like it's a little bit of the Bond of the Connery Bond where you know he'll go and talk to Q and he kind of can't be bothered to listen too long. Um, this Fleming is you know this Bond is touching on that where he goes in and he just says, yeah, I think I got it. Let's move on. And incidentally, if we're gonna I don't know if we're gonna throw Lazenby's voiceover
Oh,
dubbing
it's getting in there.
into this part. Yeah.
Oh, trust
I
me,
mean, if we
I
lump
didn't
that
forget.
into
That's
this,
coming up.
yeah. Okay, I'll wait till we get to that then.
But yeah. But for me, this is for sure. It's gonna be a win for for the film for me,
Mm,
because this was of all the Fleming novels, this is my hardest chapters to get through in any of Fleming. So it's the only time I'm like,
yeah,
Fleming, you're completely losing me on this one. So after
yeah.
4 rounds, I'm at 2-2, you're 3-1. So we'll see how we get
Okay.
going. Round 5, Irma Blunt. Now, I for me, Irma Bunt in the novel is the main character that drives this for me. Because Blowfield doesn't have that much point, and even in the movie, he doesn't have much point. But especially in the novel, Irma Bunt is the one that really pushes the story. That's the dynamic. He's very much playing cat and mouse with Irma Bunt, and I love the way that Fleming describes. There's one quote from the book. He says that she has a monkey grip of her hand, and I just think that image of just this grotesque woman. But I think that one really goes. But I do think that she really carries the story in the novel. What do you think about Irma Bunt as a character, both in the Fleming and the film?
I agree with what you're saying. I think that her character does a lot of heavy lifting in the book, because I think Fleming is purposely trying to keep Blofeld mysterious. You know, if I keep him in the shadow, everybody will be curious about when is Blofeld going to show up. So
This
we'll let her
ominous,
do a lot of the work.
yeah.
But like you said, she always keeps it interesting. So there's no problem. Like, we can stay with this character for as long as we need to. She's very good in the film. Also very good. I mean, I kind of remember feeling like I like, she's very good. The part that she's playing in the film, like the actress who's playing her, is very good. But I remember feeling like I think if you just went to any schoolhouse and just grabbed one of the cranky old,
It's exactly what I was going to. I made the same analogy.
Yeah.
She very much feels like a turn of the 19th century school.
Right, exactly. You could have just grabbed any one of those cranky old wenches, and probably would have just done fine.
Who's the one from the oh god, from Matilda? Trenchbull. Very much Trenchbull.
Okay.
But yeah, I think so too. I just think for me, the film is very good. The actress is very good, but I'm left knowing after reading the novel and seeing how fleshed out Irma is and how he describes her and how she spent so much time and how she's always got that leering eye, just never always judging, being very polite but always very judging. For me, I just think that the Fleming beats this out a little bit. What do you think?
I think I'll go with you on this one. I think that, yeah, I think this is a character that really does benefit from the good writing of Fleming, and a little less so in the film. In the film, she's just there to kind of grunt and groan, and
yeah.
She's like, I don't know who said it. It was like Family Guy. He says her name should be Thud.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So round 6, we're gonna go Piz Gloria. And I'm gonna kind of lump everything in there, not just the scene itself, but everything you're talking about. You're talking about the way Lazenby places Sir Hilary Bray, the voiceover, the cigarette. In the Fleming, they talk really much about the cigarette game, and how excited he gets the room when he's always playing this cat and mouse game to be interesting and win over the room, but not be too interesting. I have to still be Sir Hilary Bray. I still have to be a little light in the loafers. Still doing that. But I think the game and meeting the girls and the cigarette game and all of that is far different in the film than it is in Fleming. How do you feel about the way that the both are played?
I would go with that. I think that the film does capture that essence, that kind of, like you said, that playfulness, that Bond is trying to be charming, trying to sort of work the room. I mean, like you could and again, the film will always sort of feel like the Cliff's Notes version of the book, where they're trying to sort of truncate different elements and make it work in a shorter span of time and without the luxury of a lot of words. So like, I love the idea that you could see Bond already trying to get, so if everybody gives me their names, I can give you, and she cuts them off and says, no, we won't be doing that or whatever. And it's like, okay, so I like how it's played. you know, I mean, and there's a lot of, and again, this is another one of those times where the film also has a great luxury, uh, where I mean, in the book, it's a lot of beautiful women up at this mountaintop hideout.
Mhm.
Well, boy, do they capitalize on that. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
perfect opportunity to get like these stunning women up in one of the most magnificent settings in the world. I mean, honestly, and I'm pretty biased from having actually been there, so it's like I can tell you, I mean, it's just like mind-blowingly amazing up there. So I, you know, I really have to say, like, just they took that scene and really capitalized on it to me, like, to the nth degree. I mean, they really turned that into something that's pretty spectacular to watch.
See, I'm going to disagree with you on that one because I think that one, as we go, Lazenby, the dub over and all that, it's very distracting as we go.
Yeah.
And I think that the way Lazenby plays the entire thing is very much like a frat boy gone wild. And like he has like
Yeah.
all this other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
The novel, he's on a mission and he's very much scared.
Yeah.
And he needs not to be found out, and there's
Mm,
much more higher stakes, it feels like.
yeah.
Whereas, as like I said, in this one, it feels like you're just a dude hanging out with a bunch of chicks, bruh.
Yeah. Right.
So
Right. Right.
for me, it loses the suspense and it loses that, and even the way that the novel, he tries to go get the thing to break the locks and things like that. Very much
Mm,
difficult because he knows he's under the watchful eye of Irma Blunt always, and
yeah.
everyone's suspicious of him. He's very much paranoid. He's very much dealing with this. He's also having to deal with the girls paying too much attention to him. He's like, "You guys got to
Yeah.
stop." But
Yeah.
he still does sneak into the room. I mean, he still gets his thing in, but he uses it. It's not as just going around being a frat boy. It's very much with a use.
Yeah.
So for me, I think that's a big difference. How do you feel about Lazenby's performance as we go through this? Because it's really, this is the part where I'm throw a lump in Lazenby performance as Bond versus the Fleming's Bond, because I think
Mm,
this is where the acting comes out, and this is where it separates who's better of the Fleming Bond or the way that Lazenby played in this role.
yeah. You know, yes, I agree with you. You know, I've always enjoyed Lazenby's performance, and I kind of feel like, and when I say that I enjoy it, I'm not saying that he's not Robert De Niro. I mean, I'm not saying he's a great actor per se, but I do think his presence works really well. I think if he stuck around and did like 3 films, I think by the third one you'd see something kind of interesting. But then again, I don't know if he was ever the type to be able to do 3 films,
Mm-mm.
because he's just like you said. I mean, he is kind of just a big frat boy in real life, and that sort of shines through. And I remember,
Yeah.
like, I'll watch his performance sometimes, and I feel like I'm watching a guy who's just tickled pink that he's playing James Bond. Like it's almost like he can't stop smiling in certain scenes, and I
Yeah.
kind of feel like, well, I mean, Bond wouldn't necessarily grunt and growl or anything, but right, but Lazenby just sort of has this big smirk on, like, look at me, I'm playing James Bond. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, so it's a little hit and miss, but
And another thing, the kilt. The kilt that he wears bothers me. That whole outfit. I get that you're trying to be. There are times in style that you're trying to be trendy, but even all of his outfits, with that kilt bothers me. Yeah, I think that's probably the ice on the cake for what finishes me off. How do you feel about that last part? About, you say that he smiles a lot, all that, his presentation, his demeanor, and
Mhm,
also for me it's his all outfits as well. Which neither of us are the uh, are the style aficionados, but we could still say,
right.
like, oh, dude, like that's noticeable even for us simpletons.
My inner Braveheart doesn't mind the kilt, really. I mean, it does. I mean, I get what you're saying, because it's like he's not going for Braveheart. He's
Yeah.
doing the kilt, but wearing like the bookworm glasses and
Mhm.
trying to be nerdy. So, yeah, but I mean, that doesn't really bother me. I kind of feel like I'm not really noticing that for, at all. So
Mhm.
I'll let that one slide.
The curling is pretty nice too. The curling is a nice touch, but for me, overall, I'll let you go first, but Fleming film, the whole part of Piz Gloria.
I'm gonna give it to the film. Like I said, I think that again the whole, a lot of the themes that we're probably gonna talk about sometimes, or a lot of things that I find that I'm touching on is like, you're trying to do a big sort of Hollywood film, so you're trying to, you know, on one hand make it an espionage thriller and make it, nail biting and exciting. On the other hand, you're trying to make it like, give it spectacle.
Mhm.
And I feel like in terms of spectacle, it's kind of like you could, I mean, I can't imagine, I can't imagine a better setting. The women are pretty great. Um, you know, so yeah, I think I'm gonna have to give it to the film,
Mhm.
just for this part anyway.
I'm gonna go with the Fleming, and I'm gonna go, and here's my reasoning: is a lot of the main reasoning is for Lazenby's Bond. I have a I don't like the way he plays it. I don't like the way it's set up. I don't like the
Yeah.
way he acts to it, and I don't think he understands the moment as he's acting to it. A lot of the times when he does the helicopter scared and stuff like that, I get what you're playing, when he like overplays it, and then when he's there,
Yeah.
he goes into frat guy, and he never captures, hey, he has too much fun with it. And I know that's kind of a weird thing because I do like when Bond has fun. But for me, he never gets what Fleming gets, is that this is high stakes, and if I lose myself,
Yeah.
which he does a lot in the novels, the minute he in a lot of the older films, the minute he loses himself where he starts having too much fun is when someone close to him dies or something bad happens. And I don't
Yeah.
think that it's ever captured by Lazenby in this. For me,
Yeah.
that's why Fleming gets the nod. Round 7, Blowfield.
Mm.
Now, this is a hard one because I said this before for Fleming. For me, Irma Blunt is the one that carries the story, and Blowfield at the ends kind of feels like just the last little bit, like God, you never see the T-Rex until the end of the T-Rex, right?
Mm.
Um, for me, I just I like how he describes Blowfield. I like the meeting between them, the earlobes and stuff like that. But for me, even Fleming feels dull to me. Uh, how do you feel about Blowfield as a character in Fleming? And then we'll get into the film after that.
Uh, I think he's fine. I mean, again, it's I'm trying to like I'm trying to remember any real specific
That's the point. You
parts of
don't, right?
Blofeld that really kind of
Nothing
jumped out at
stands
me.
out.
Right? Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
completely dull. Nothing stands out. And what I think is unique about the Bond franchise is that most good franchises are carried by their villains, right? The Batman is very much
Mm.
carried by their villains. Even Marvel, when they have good villains, the story is better. Or anything franchise where you have a good guy, bad guy, the bad guy has to be really bad or at least captivating or interesting. Most of
Mm.
the other Bond baddies have something interesting or have something there. For me, Blowfield never hits it. He comes the closest in Thunderball for me, and a little bit in You Only Live Twice. But for me, I never get a feeling like there's anything interesting about Blowfield. Even the name Blowfield to me is very dull. I don't like saying it. Blowfield, like it doesn't have any. You know what I mean? There's so much
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
it that's so dull. Um,
Yeah.
so that's how I feel about the film. And exactly your point. I even might, as I was trying to write this and set up the topics, I'm thinking, what do I remember about Blowfield? And the point is, I don't remember anything about him. They kind of make him cool, like
Yeah.
he's tall, he's big, he has a presence.
Yeah.
But that's more from where I remember from Thunderball, which is just kind of carries over. This one
Right.
feels like a complete dud. What do you think
Yeah.
about What do you think about Telly Savalas as Blowfield?
I think Telly is great. I think Telly is definitely the best Blofeld. I've heard a lot of people complain that he's too thuggish. I don't see that at all. I mean, I get it because people who are sort of grew up on like Kojak and stuff. So like, I can see why you would make that connection, but I don't get that from
No,
this
me
film
either.
at all.
To
I think
me,
he's got.
to me, he feels dainty. Like that's the word I get. The way he smokes his cigarettes, like he does this little thing when he
Yeah.
does this. He just
Yeah.
he feels like someone that you'd see the Turkish bathhouse. You know what I mean? Like just, like I feel he's very dainty. I don't think that he's has gravitas. He has a deep voice and a bald head, but I think his presence is very much a thespian. I get no sense of this is a good villain. I don't even get the aristocracy, the gravitas that he's supposed to have, the presence that he's supposed to have. He describes him many times in Fleming. This guy has a presence. He walks into the room and this is someone to be dealt with. And I think for me, Telly is dainty, forgettable, and not great at all.
Yeah, I can see why you would say that, and I do. I agree that he doesn't have that kind of erudite sort of presence. But on the other hand, I also think he's the only Blofeld I think that's ever been in the films that I could see on skis. Like when he jumps on the skis and
Really?
and goes down after Bond. Also, I mean, well, none of the other Blofelds would have done that.
No, for sure. But I even Telly, I think he's very awkward. I can't imagine him. I picture him dribbling a basketball like this. Like that kind of that kind of athleticism. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And even when he's on the skis, when he's fake doing, he's like the guy. I don't think has ever done anything athletic in his life. For me, again, it's a huge miss for me.
Yeah, I could see. Yeah, I guess I could see that. I mean, now that you mentioned it, I mean, I remember hearing a lot of stories about how he would, they were always playing poker every night, and Telly was always trying to rope Lazenby into playing because Lazenby couldn't play, so he would basically get all his money, whatever. Like that's more how I see him, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've always thought. See, it's probably a kind of a low bar because I don't think the franchise ever really had a great Blofeld. No. I feel like they've never really nailed that character at all. So for me, I guess maybe I'm kind of grading on a curve a little bit because I've just always felt like Telly to me was like the closest. Like Telly, he plays it to me more like a real person. Like I feel like the other ones with the fake scars and just the funny over the top sort of way they play it. Telly to me seems like a guy who has an actual mission, and I feel like I buy the fact that he's there doing his thing, and he's more believable to me.
Yeah.
So,
well, just because your competition sucks doesn't mean that you don't suck. You know what I mean? So that's the position I'll take for this. Because for me, Telly, I don't even know. I have strong feelings about all the Blofelds. And Blofeld's a character. Just for me, just nothing. No film captured it right. And even Fleming, I think he nailed it best when he was in Thunderball, but I think in this one he was a little weak. So for me, both kind of low points of both the film and the book. But for me, I'm gonna give it to Fleming on this one. How about you?
I gotta go with Telly, but I mean, it's not an enthusiastic.
You,
vote,
sir,
but
are out of your mind.
Well, like I said, I mean, honestly, I honestly don't remember much of the Blofeld. I mean, I feel like I remember, I can remember a lot of things that happened at Piz Gloria. There was a lot of, to your point earlier, scenes that make you feel like, Bond never really forgets that this is a serious mission with high stakes and that he is in danger. But I never really get that necessarily right from Blofeld. I feel like, the things are happening, and sure, Blofeld is the puppet master, I suppose. These things are happening because he's, making it happen.
Yeah.
But I'm not really getting it from him directly. So I feel like for me, it's just much easier to, remember and get a sense of the Blofeld from the film. So
yeah.
But like I said, not an enthusiastic choice.
Yeah, and most of what happens is Blofeld is drummed up by other people talking about him, not his actual scenes where you're like, you're in there and you're like, wow, this is a cool character. I agree. I am not giving a glowing review for Fleming's Blofeld, but it's just my opinion of Telly as Blofeld is so low that it has to go Fleming. All right, we're gonna go. Speaking of Blofeld, we're gonna go to round 8. Bond's cover is blown. Now, in Fleming, it's a bribery scene, right? Him and Blofeld are getting together. Blofeld's kind of saying, hey, maybe we can arrange something. And Bond has to be like, oh, well, maybe, and have to not be too eager about this. And he knows he's on the hook. But then something that comes along, and it's a little too convenient, right? The guy who's following him is who's Station Z, right? Who
Yeah.
kind of knows him, but doesn't know him, kind of works with
Yeah.
him, but doesn't. He comes in and he gets caught. And then it's like, oh, Bond, we work together, and they're supposed to still be secret agents, and it's conveniently right at the point where Bond is going to get it. How do you feel about that scene as Fleming wrote it?
Uh, well, I think I mean, again, kind of going to what we were saying earlier, the way Fleming does it's kind of terrifying, really.
Mhm.
He basically, like, this guy is found out, but like the way they handle in the film is much more hands off,
Mhm.
and it's sort of happening over there, and Bond doesn't even really seem to have much to do with it at all, as opposed to this, where the guy's like begging for his life, and Bond is sitting there going like, I can't. There's nothing I can do to help this guy. Like, I know I'm
I'm gonna
kind
have to
of
sentence him to death. That's it. Like, I
right.
can't
I'm
save you.
condemning this guy to die, but there's nothing I can do right now.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's pretty tough. It's a tough moment.
Mhm. For me, I think I like it. I like the stakes, and I can imagine being in that moment because they do have an earlier scene where he's at a restaurant and he sees somebody who's supposed to know Sir Hilary Bray, and Irma Bunt's looking at him, and oh, poor chap. He was my cousin.
Mm,
Wasn't we look almost the same? So they
yeah,
had that first one, and they kind of introduce him how he sweats through it and he gets through it. This one is like I like the scene. I like can imagine being in there and having your cover blown by somebody who walks in and goes, "You're James Bond," and he's like, "No, I'm
right,
not. I'm
right,
Sir Hilary Bray." When already there's stakes are there. My only
yeah,
problem with it, and I get that you're trying to tell a story, but it's so convenient. Like it's super convenient, right? He's got him.
yeah,
Why right at this moment while he's having a meeting, this henchman's
yeah,
barge in and be like, "Blow it! Look at this
yeah,
guy." A
right, right,
little
right,
too convenient, but it does add to
yeah.
the suspense.
Like, how small is this world that this is happening?
I
Yeah,
know. I mean, it's supposed to be
right,
this little tiny secluded island and or this little mountaintop, and we've already seen
yeah,
two people to blow his cover.
right, right,
Very, very, very difficult to imagine, and I think the
yeah,
timing is a little off. But in the film, it's that he didn't know something about the College of Arms. That would be a more
right,
like
right,
that would be a more likely scenario.
yeah,
I don't know if it has the same gravitas towards it. Um, and when in Fleming's, I like this a lot. Is that he doesn't give it up. He's like, okay, he's still. We both kind of know that it's blown, but we don't know, but we're gonna assume that this is blown. So he goes
yeah,
back, and now he knows it's time to go. So now he's sitting there plotting, waiting. He waits until he goes to sleep. He snores a little bit, knowing that he has to go, and he's already mapped out the ski route. And he
mm,
closes his eyes and he waits snoring, he waits to go, and then he sneaks out and he throws on his skis and he goes, he's like, I got a head start. I'm not the greatest
yeah,
skier. These guys know how to ski better than I do now, but I'm
yeah,
going to get out there before. Whereas in the film, they throw him in the little gondola thing, and say, "What you?
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, you have prisoner. What are you doing here?" Uh,
yeah.
compare and contrast those two parts.
Yeah, like, I think the scene where he's in with the cable cars and stuff, and
Yeah, and then
um,
he rips out the pockets and he puts them in
yeah,
there. And
yeah, and I like that because it's a good Bond moment, because it's he has to rely on his own ingenuity. He doesn't have a Q gadget to get him out of something, so
but why
I
is
like
he
that
there?
idea.
you,
Well, I mean, he's trapped, and I mean, I guess they have
but
to
you
put
have
him
a million other
somewhere.
rooms. Why are you putting him
Well, it
there
is. I mean,
with a hole to
yeah,
escape, with ropes to
right,
go out,
yeah.
steel cables
Well, I
that
guess
can
the
lead you
idea
out?
was that, like, yeah, I mean, I guess the idea is like in reality, he ain't going nowhere. Like, I mean, Bond gives it a
He
shot,
goes
but
somewhere.
I don't think, yeah, but he doesn't get very far. I mean, he's just,
Joe, you know what this is like? This is like when you have dinner with somebody and you don't like their girlfriend, and the girlfriend goes to the bathroom. You're like, "Hey, dude, what are you doing with her?" And you're like, "You don't understand her. When you guys are around her, she's way cooler, guys. You don't understand, all right?" That's how I feel right now because it makes no sense. You got a whole rooms. You have all those
Well,
rooms.
I'll tell you what, I feel like honestly, there's a part of me that sort of feels like the reason why it doesn't work is because they've already established that they have this giant underground sort of like lair where like all his where he does all his science, and it's basically this sort of like hollowed out cave sort of area. So you kind of go in the movie, you're like, well, why didn't they just take him down there?
Right.
Surely they have rooms down there, right? But I kind of feel like in real life, like I like this place is not that big, and it really wouldldn't. I mean, I guess they
You
could
don't
put him in
feel
like a
like this is
bedroom or
little
something.
Austin Powersy, like Austin Powers, like if
But-
if what's his face, Sean Green was like,
Yeah.
why would you put him there with the hole? Why don't we just put him in a
Right.
dungeon? Like, no,
Yeah.
you don't get it, Scott.
Yeah. I don't know. I get. I mean, but honestly, I say I just. I mean, I think that there's. I've seen other movies where it's kind of like you're saying, like it's just really obvious why put him there. Obviously, he can escape from there, but I kind of feel like the movie even sort of tells you like he really couldn't escape from there. He had to sort of get out another way, to actually make his escape. He couldn't go down the cable cars. I mean, no human being is gonna actually. I mean, actually, well, maybe I shouldn't say that because the Moonraker basically does exactly that, but. Like,
You don't get it, guys.
Down.
You just don't get her. Like she's really great. So I'll keep going through the whole escape, right? Because we're gonna go down. He gets through because I think we've already we've already got this part. We'll get down, which I'm clearly not going to convince you to just admit that it's a stupid scene. But he gets down there and he skis down there and he's got the avalanche and all this stuff, and he gets down and he's just completely exhausted. He gets to the ski area, he's like, oh my god, he's like, I just want to rest and just give up because he's been battered, bruised through it. And then Tracy's comes there and he saves him, and they go off and they speed through, and it shows how good of a driver Tracy is. And then the scene plays out very well. Hold here, we're gonna go, I'm gonna change the signs, the bad guys go off. In the film, kind of the same, almost the same thing, except for the polar bear, which is like, I'll pass the polar bear, but very much. And she skates up to him and kind of scene. How about the rest of the escape? How do you like both of them?
I like them both really well. I mean, I think they both really work. I think the changing the sign and the guy drives off a cliff. I mean, that's a great way to do it in the book, when you're relying on the spoken word to convey in your imagination something that's happening. So you have to be a little more direct, I suppose.
And it's more believable when you understand how those roads are, right, on the European roads, especially on the mountains. And imagine what it was like in 1950s, and the cars weren't very good and the tires weren't very good. It would very much be, if you're trying to speed around a corner in these little tiny mountain things with bad signage, it's very believable that you could go off one of those.
Oh yeah. I mean, and it's pretty hair raising too. So I mean, I totally could see that. So I think it's done really well, and I think in the movie, with the added scene with the stock car racing, I think is pretty cool. I like that pretty well. Again, it gives Tracy a time to shine, and I mean, I like, one of the things I love about this, like I feel like that's a great moment in the story, because it kind of circles back to Tracy at exactly the right time. Like when Bond is, like you said, he's tired, he's desperate, and then she shows up like this vision and basically takes it from there and says, and basically gets him out of there. So I think, again, it's just a great example of how it's good structure, it's good storytelling. It pulls this main character back into the story at the right time after they've been absent for a while. So yeah, I think it's great. Again, I think that the ski chase is great, the stock car thing is great, then the follow-up ski chase is with ending with the avalanche, I think is aces.
Yeah, I mean, the ski chase is phenomenal. But what I like too about the Fleming, and what the film fails to do in this scene, is Fleming goes back and he thinks about, Bond is thinking about Tracy throughout his time at Piz Gloria. The film never touches it. He leaves, we forget about Tracy, and then Tracy comes back in. You're like, oh, who is this person? He was just acting like a frat boy for the top, having his choice from all these women, and now we're supposed to believe that he's gone from having the time of his life up there into this, where like it's just
Yeah.
we've had this in jest conversation many times between you and I, but I just find that
Yeah.
that's so silly that he was just up there having the time of his life with a buffet of girls, and he comes
Yeah.
down at the skating rink. He's like, "Oh
Yeah.
yes, I want to get married now." No, you
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah.
You were just up there.
Yeah.
Whereas in Fleming, he's very much he's not enjoying himself. He's going through hell, and he still kind of thinks of Tracy. And when he sees it, he's like, "Oh, thank God, this is my salvation," because I have not been having a good
Mhm.
time. I've been stressed out and going through a hard time.
Yeah.
Defend your part there.
Well, I honestly, I think it works very well in the book and in the film, but sort of for different reasons. Meaning, like you said, the book allows you to look in Bond's mind and say, he's still thinking about Tracy and that kind of thing. I think in the film it sort of works differently, but still as well, where it does seem like he's forgotten her for a while, but it's almost like it's almost like a cautionary tale. Like
Yeah.
like you said, he's off with these chicks and he's distracted with these chicks, um, gets himself into trouble, gets himself caught, barely escapes, and now again at a moment where he's desperate and tired and looking like the bleakest moment, she shows up, and it's almost like he kind of wakes up like, oh yeah, this is who I should have been. Like, had I stayed with her all along, I wouldn't be in this mess, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I kind of think it parallels just like kind of a guy's journey in general. Like, I mean, most guys settle down when they realize, like, dude, I can't keep partying acting like a jerk my time. I gotta, start thinking like a couple years down the road.
Challenge accepted, Joseph.
Right.
Yeah, I agree, but I think too when it culminates, the film ends culminates in them in the barn and in the little hideaway, and then that's where the marriage proposal comes in. Whereas the
Mm.
Fleming, she's like, just rest, you've had a long time, and he wakes up and they're alone, and they have the proposal in as they're
Mm.
separating, going from the airport. What do you think about which, they're kind of the same thing but a different flavor to them? Compare
Yeah.
and contrast that.
Well, I tell you, I don't know if I'm skipping ahead, but you're touching on the fact that like Bond sort of drops her off and leaves her somewhere in the book, whereas in the film she gets captured and taken back to Piz Gloria,
Yeah.
which I mean, to me that's a masterful that definitely goes into the film column, because I feel like that was a brilliant move to put Tracy back in harm's way, that now he has to go rescue her along with taking out Piz Gloria. So I think that's kind of a master, like it's one of the few examples where I think that the book, and actually, and I think more and more as I really start to do compare and contrast with the film and the book, there are a lot of times where I think the film does make some pretty solid choices. I think years ago I would have said just leave Fleming alone, don't change a single thing. And I would have said this is one of those rare cases where the film really takes a good step forward and does that. I mean, it story wise, it just works perfectly.
Yep. So that's what we'll end our voting for this part. The Bond's cover is blown, the whole scene, and it's a long scene to compare and contrast, but I think it kind of flows. They parallel on each other, and there's subtle differences in between the two that you can vote on. So, what do you think, Fleming or film?
I'm going with the film. I mean, I like, again, I mean, the ski scenes, like you said, it is a lot to lump into one sort of, but the ski scenes are great. I think bringing Tracy in at that moment is phenomenal. Again, I do think, one of the things that we didn't talk about was the fact that there's that scene in the book where the guy, one of the henchmen, gets thrown down one of the gondola tracks.
Oh yeah, in the beginning, Bob
talk in detail.
sets it up.
Yeah. And like they said, like after a while, his bones must have been just shattering, all over the place and stuff. And it is a pretty chilling thing. Again, adding to the tension, like we were saying before, like the book does have a lot of, like, it really does have good tension. But yeah, I mean, I really do have to give it to the film. I think they captured I mean, the scenery is incredible. Tracy's great. The stock car race is a nice addition. So yeah, I'm gonna go with the film here.
I'm going to go with Fleming. I think that
Okay.
Fleming keeps the suspension going. I think the suspense, and I think it transitions better. And I think that the timing of Tracy is a it seems more of a relief than the film does.
Mm.
But I actually I'm not going to dog the film too much, other than the fact that again he was having the time of his life in the brothel, and now all of a sudden he wants to. He's scared of polar. He's scared of little scary polar bears. But that's the thing. So now we go on to the siege on Piz Gloria, and I'm gonna skip the part about the agriculture and stuff like that. It's kind of an interesting thing, but I don't think there's not much to debate about. One, he sees it, and one, the agriculture finds out. So we'll leave
Mm.
that discussion we'll table that one.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I want to talk about two more, which I think are going to be good. And the first one I want to talk about is the siege on Piz Glory. And you started to touch on it a little bit. Is that the stakes are so much different in this one, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've gotten to Fleming goes into. We know what it is, and we got to get him, and it's more of a personal like vendetta. But the film, this is Draco's daughters up there. It's Bond's, love interest. It's everything up there. That not only are we facing this, it
Mm.
also gives a better hook for Draco to want to come in and help out.
Yeah. Yes.
Um, what do you think about? We could start comparing, track, contrast that, and then we'll talk about as the actual siege itself happens. But the stakes
Yeah.
for the siege.
Yeah. I think well, I was gonna say it's probably smart that we skipped over all that agriculture stuff, because I remember in the book there's like kind of like we were saying
Yeah.
earlier about how he gets a little caught up, and this is another one like he spends a
Oh,
lot of time
turkeys
talking
and
about
turkey
that stuff, and it's
fowl and
like,
fowl and
yeah,
birds and
like
oh
all right, we get it, like enough. Yeah, no, but I think the siege is great. I love that, like I said, I love that they put Tracy in harm's way and Bond has to rescue her. I love, I mean, because it shows that like Tracy, again, it is a little cliche that the bad guy kidnaps the heroine and takes us up to the, I mean, this is something like something out of Mario Brothers.
yeah.
You know, like I'm gonna take the
It's a
beautiful
bee.
princess and hide her away, and
Yeah,
you have to come and rescue her. Uh, but still, it works. I mean, I think
yeah,
Tracy doing the poetry, speaking Shakespeare, and I mean that to me is really good stuff. Uh, and yeah, the siege works, the action is good. I mean, the music is phenomenal. Um, so I think the film kind of nails it, and again, doesn't get bogged down in a lot of talk about agriculture. So
yeah.
I
That
think
part
it's pretty.
it is another one that drags on. For me,
Yeah.
it is. It drags on, and I like the stakes. I like the added part. I really like how the Fleming goes through with the pilot. He's very funny. He's like, who gave you permission to fly in this airspace? We've got this
Mm,
thing. We've got this rich guy. We need to get through this. Are you going to be, responsible for this?
yeah.
It's very tense, but I do like the film and the way the siege goes,
Hmm.
and the visual and some of the cinematography when up in the air and sunsets going on. It's like this
Yeah.
raid at sunset. It's so beautiful to
Yeah.
watch.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you think, Fleming or film on that one?
I got to go with the film. I mean,
Yeah,
definitely. I mean, again, we don't waste a lot of time talking about agriculture in this, and it's they just hit all the high marks. The action is really good. The rescue of Tracy is great. I love that she gets some time to shine in this. Yeah, I mean, and by the way, I don't know if I'm fast forwarding, but I've always liked the bobsled chase. I always thought the
yeah,
bobsled chase was really, really good. I mean, the music there is great.
yeah.
I
I'll
mean,
throw the
again, this
bobsled
is,
chase in there too. We didn't discuss, but yeah, the
yeah.
bobsled chase is cool.
I mean, going back to honestly, the first time I can still remember the first time I saw this film, and I remember that bobsled chase really stuck with me. And
Mhm.
I remember saying to myself, for a film that's really old, because again, I'm like, I think I probably was like late teens, early 20s when I first saw this film,
Mhm.
and so again, it's very difficult to get into older films. But I remember thinking, like, for an older movie, that's a pretty good action scene. Like that worked out pretty nice. Like I felt like I knew the geography of where everything was. The music is really good. So I thought it really worked.
You know what's interesting too is you're probably closer to that film's coming out date then than you are from your time you saw it then, right? I mean, you saw it, I'm assuming in the eight or what 80s or something like that,
Late 80s, yeah.
late 80s, and you think that that was 20 years, and now you're 40 years almost removed from that. You know, I mean, it's funny because I even think about that you talk about time span. We're closer, we're further away from Goldeneye than Goldeneye was from On Her Majesty's. Like crazy
Yeah.
things to think about like that. But
You're
yeah,
not kidding. I mean, I was born in '69, so if I saw it in my late 20s and now I'm 53, yeah, your
yeah.
point's well taken. Yeah,
Yeah, and even me, I'm getting up there too. But yeah, for
yeah,
sure, I'm going to give it to the film too. I think that the stakes are better, the cinematography is better, and we don't have to sit through the guy cracking the cases, the agriculture, talking about birds, and it just doesn't feel. It doesn't
yeah,
feel, you're gonna kill a bird. I get it, but the stakes just aren't as great.
yeah,
I don't find it for that.
yeah.
And so, round 10, the ending. Now, I think we can dive pretty good on this one because it very much parallels, what we see, where they went with No Time to Die, and you see a lot of times that they went with that. And I
Mm,
think that Fleming went through and they go and they get married, and he's like, I don't want to take these bells off. I don't want to be married. I want any fuss
mm,
about me. And he gets there, and then he's very much in denial, gets killed, knows it's Irma Blunt, and the film does kind of the same thing. There's a good wedding ceremony. There's a bliss. Everybody's happy. It feels like you're gonna have this happy ending, and then the rug is just ripped out from you. Right?
yeah,
You're sitting there. You're
yeah,
watching. You're reading the book. It's just ripped out. What do you think about
yeah.
the ending?
I like it. I like it, and like you said, your comparison to No Time to Die is pretty spot on because again, that's kind of one of the reasons why I like No Time to Die and everyone else
Mm,
hates it. Is like it's like, but I gotta tell you, I mean, I like the idea that Tracy's killed in this book. I like the idea that in Moonraker, Bond gets stood up. Like I like the reality, that it doesn't always work out.
mhm.
So yeah, I think I, it's poetry. I think it's absolute poetry that he's that close to kind of getting to where he wants to be, to the happily ever after, but it just ain't in the cards for guys like him.
Yeah,
So I think it works. I mean, I think it's spectacular, and again, it's like just such a great Bond girl.
they did it
So
so true. The movie did so true to the book too, which
yeah,
is why it's hard to decipher between the two because
mm,
they did it spot on. We have all the time in the world. She's just closing her eyes. She's just resting. Like it's very much
hmm,
plays it perfectly. The film captures it perfectly. They didn't deviate at all from that.
yeah,
And On Her Majesty still, I think, one of the least, or License to Kill maybe is the least grossing film of all time. And I think I'm going to do the comparison to No Time to Die is of the time. You've got the 1960s, Vietnam's going on, the country's going through a lot of turmoil. And
mm,
at that moment, probably the last thing that they want to deal with all the things with Nixon and without well, Nixon hadn't happened yet, but we still got the Vietnam War.
yeah,
We got all this turmoil. We got all this social class warfare. We've got all these things going on. The last thing they probably want to deal with is to
yeah,
see a sad ending like that. And I think that parallels a lot with No Time to Die is that we've gone through such a depressing place, especially when it finally came out, we've gone through so much crap that when No Time to Die comes, and that's the ending
yeah,
you get to it, and that's the time. And you know what? When I see On Her Majesty's now, I don't have to wait 2 years for a new Bond. Or if I was going to see it at the time, that's your new Bond. This is how your
yeah,
Bond is. You have to keep that in your palate for a long time. Whereas if I
yeah,
can On Her Majesty's now, I can just watch a different movie. Same thing with No Time to Die. This is what we're left with. This is what we're left with at a time
mm,
when there's a lot of turmoil. And I think that there parallels a lot about how I feel about No Time to Die and how I feel about On Her Majesty. Probably at the time, that was the last thing they want to do is walk away, have the rug ripped out of them, and to see that kind of a part.
yeah.
What do you think about that parallel between No Time to Die and On Her Majesty's?
I think it's extremely valid. I very much agree with you, and I think yeah, I could definitely understand with the world being as nuts as it is, and Doesn't look like it's gonna get any less nuts anytime soon. So,
Yeah.
so I can see why a lot of people said that this is not the right time for No Time to Die. And yeah, you could definitely see that. And
But
I
as it,
think back then it was probably much more shocking too,
yeah.
because I don't think I mean at that point you just see Connery just kind of going off with his leading lady every single solitary movie. So this was totally out of left field.
But as On Her Majesty aged, the ending. Now we can talk about the ending of On Her Majesty's as this, poetic genius, like this beautiful
Yep.
moment. Like what a good moment. And maybe on No Time to Die we'll have that same point. When our Avatar's been left to marinate, we've got some new ones. That's not the lasting impression that we have to sit and leave it on our impression for so long. Perhaps it'll maybe get the same On Her Majesty's treatment that we're giving to it now. At the ending, I think is amazing. It's beautifully done, both the film and Fleming. The question is, Fleming or film for the ending?
For the ending, actually, I guess I'll go with the film. I'll go with the film because again, I think they just really nailed it. See, I mean, it again, when you put these two against each other, you're talking about a master work of a book, and it's almost like the film, either you're going to drop the ball or you're going to take it and run and maybe even put a little more polish on it, because you have the you're doing this through a visual medium as opposed to doing it through the written word. So yeah, I gotta say, I think the final scene, where it's shot, where it's set, the way it plays out, Lazenby pretty much nails it. I think it really does hit every mark spot on correctly.
I will
So I'm gonna
say
go with the film.
the film absolutely copies the whole thing, right? They don't deviate at all from it. So my normal inclination would be like Fleming because he wrote it, but
Yeah.
I give credit to the film for being brave enough to say this is perfect as is. We're going to leave it as is. We're not going to try to do anything spectacular. We're not going to add a bunch of fluff to it. This is the moment. This is perfect the way it is. We're going to put it as is. So for that reason, I am going to give Fleming or the film the nod on the ending. I am going to give that. So you want to know the final tallies here before we give our final judgment? You with a resounding 8-2 over film. Yeah, you crushed it. Me, I was a little closer. I went Fleming 6-4. So now we do the final judgment. You know the tallies, you know how much you've done individual, but now let's the sum of everything. What is better, sir? On Her Majesty's. I need you to judge. I need you to give me the final tally. I'm not sure I'm going to be whole surprised. I don't think anybody's going to be surprised. But what do you think is better, sir?
Yeah.
The Fleming novel or the film?
Yeah, I mean, again, I can't at this point. I mean, even to be honest, I'm a little surprised it was 8-2 for me, because I would have thought it would have been a little more even-handed. But like I said, I mean, I kind of feel like, again, you are working with the book is an absolute brilliant book. I absolutely adore this book. So the film was it's really a matter of either the film is going to drop the ball and not do it as well as it was in the book, or are they going to stay true to it and add a little more flavor, add a little more seasoning to it. And I think that's what the film does. I really do think that, I mean, they were true to Fleming's work. They kept the spirit of it at every turn. Even when they had to sort of speed through certain things or rearrange a couple things, they kept the spirit intact. And again, the cast is great, the settings are all great, the music is absolutely phenomenal. So I think they took a magnificent book and made a even more magnificent film out of it.
Very well said. Well, I'm going to say, and I'm probably going to surprise you, even though I went 6-4 on Fleming, I'm going to give it to the film. And the reason I'm going to say the film is better because the parts that I find not enjoyable of Fleming, I find them really not enjoyable. I find the College of Arms very boring. I think that the lead up to it isn't great. The agriculture, all that stuff isn't very good. So if I'm picking, my Sunday, what I want to do, or a rewatch, or if I'd rather rewatch the film or the novel, I'm gonna pick the film, and I hate saying this. This is gross. I feel dirty. I feel dirty, sir. But for sure, I'm gonna have to go. I actually think, yeah. So like I said, it pains me. It pains me with every fiber of my being to give the film this because I don't find the film isn't in my top 10. On Her Majesty's never really speaks to me that much. I think it's the reasons I think it's really good are the director, Peter Hunt, is fantastic. The scene is fantastic. Piz Gloria is fantastic. The editing, the pacing, all fantastic. But the reason it doesn't sit high for me is because Bond is not my favorite Bond. I don't think Lazenby is very good. The Bond villain is not very good. And for those two big reasons, and some of the plot lines, again, he's just having so much fun. For all those reasons, it doesn't hit me this way that it does other Bond fans. And for the novel, it's a lot of the same thing. I think he starts and he's got very good Fleming parts. But when I compare the novel On Her Majesty's compared to my other favorites, it doesn't even come close. It's probably right near at the bottom for me for the novel too. And I know a lot of people love the novel, but for me, the novel he misses because he loses me so many times. And sometimes when he's at the College of Arms, it's very hard to get through in the agriculture and all. I'm like, God, come on, go with it. So as much as I dog on the film, I do think the parts that they improved on the novel make up greatly, and that's why I'm going to pick the film.
I love it. I love it. You're forced to show this film a little love, and I love it.
I know. If we had, that's why it was going to be pain. As much as I knew this was perfect to have you on, and I'm going to enjoy doing this with you, I knew at the end I was going to hate myself for having to give it a little credit. But understand, I'm not giving it credit over the other movies. I'm simply giving it over the novel, which again, I could probably, if we had a novel, the ranking of the novel debate, I'd probably piss off a lot of people saying how much I don't actually like On Her Majesty's the novel.
Yeah. Well, I kind of feel like all of the Flemings, I think that, well, I mean, a lot of them, again, have those kind of like it starts wandering down this road, where it's doing a lot of exposition about the plot and about, it's like I mean, I almost feel like Fleming feels obligated because his expertise was, coming from the war, coming from an espionage background.
Diamonds Are Forever does it too. Yeah, Diamonds. Another one. It's tough. It's a tough one to get through.
Yeah, it's almost like, dude, you don't have to audition. We're already reading the book. You don't got to tell us all your credentials. We get it. Like, so just relax and do your thing. So yeah, I mean, they all kind of wander a little bit, but I just go back to the idea. Like, I remember taking like film classes in college, and I had one that was like, it was called Film and Literature, and it was basically all about doing adaptations from written works. And I kind of feel like, again, this is a master class in taking a book and taking the best parts of it, taking the essence of the story, staying true to the feel of what it's trying to tell you, and just taking it, up a notch and doing the best you can with it. And I feel like this really does kind of just score on every level.
Yeah. And I think my premise for starting even doing these Fleming versus films was very much based on this adaptation, because so many times we give, like you said, you touched on earlier, like stay true to Fleming. And I don't think we always give enough credit for what the filmmakers can do with that storyline to translate it to a film, which is not easy to make a story that's very good, but you get to hear the internal dialogue, you get to hear what's interesting about it, you get to be explained that, and to turn it into a film and make it interesting. I think of all the film adaptations, I think On Her Majesty's does the best of staying true, but also adding exactly what they need to add to the story to make it a good film.
Yep. I totally agree. It hits the quiet beats. It throws a little action in there. I mean, it's just a well-seasoned sort of a film.
Yeah. But I think we're going to stop it now because I'm starting to throw up in my mouth a little bit. Being this gushy over On Her Majesty's.
One of these days, I'm going to make you a believer. I still go back to your idea, like, you know, that you know, because Bond's up there having a good time, that it doesn't make sense that he would you know, want to settle down after that. I feel like, dude, we all of us probably settled down, not because we weren't having any fun, but because we were probably having too much fun and had to kind of calm down a little bit.
Not 20 minutes later, though, Joe. Not 20 minutes later, all right?
I feel like we all have our epiphanies at some point.
That's right. A ski trip isn't going to change my enjoyment out of having 12 angels that I get to pick from. But Joe, this was a blast. Thank you so much for doing this. I know I kept you up late doing this, but thank you. You know, you're the best doing this by far. So I always appreciate you, and thanks for coming on. And we'll this debate is in no way, shape, or form going to be put to bed between the two of us, especially when we've had the couple. So thanks for coming on, cool. Joe. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Donnie. It was always fun to do it with you, and looking forward to having a beer with you soon.
Absolutely, buddy. Take care.
All right, man. Take it easy.
If you like what you saw, then hit that subscribe button. Comment down below and leave a like and hit that subscribe button. Why are you not hitting that subscribe button?